The small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. Maria Alvarez sat at the edge of her worn-out couch, staring at a pile of bills spread across the coffee table. Her chest felt tight as she tried to make sense of the numbers, calculating and recalculating in a desperate attempt to stretch what little money she had left. Maria had been living paycheck to paycheck ever since her ex-husband walked out 5 years ago, leaving her to raise their 8-year-old son Leo on her own. At first she had managed, working double shifts at the diner, scrimping on every luxury, and relying on second-hand stores for clothes and supplies. But lately, with rising rent costs and inflation, it felt like the walls were closing in. The notice on top of the pile was what scared her most. It was the third time that month she had received a warning from her landlord. Final notice was written in bold red letters across the top. If she couldn't come up with $1,200 by the end of the week, she and Leo would lose their home. Maria rubbed her temples, exhaustion weighing on her. She glanced toward the small bedroom at the end of the hall where Leo was sleeping. She had worked a double shift at the diner that day and barely had the energy to help him with his homework before he went to bed. Every time she looked at him, her heart ached. She wanted to give him the world, a life full of opportunities and happiness, but every day felt like an uphill battle just to survive. Her phone buzzed on the table, snapping her out of her thoughts. She hesitated before picking it up, knowing it was probably another bill collector. But the screen showed an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Hi, is this Maria Alvarez?" came a warm, professional voice on the other end. "Yes, this is Maria," she replied cautiously. "This is Janice from the Community Support Office," the woman said. "I'm calling because we received your application for rental assistance. Unfortunately, due to high demand, we're unable to approve your request at this time." Maria's stomach dropped. "But," she began, her voice breaking, "I have a little boy. I don't have anywhere else to go." "I'm so sorry," Janice said sympathetically. "I wish there was more we could do, but we're completely overrun. I hope you're able to find another option." Maria hung up the phone, her hand trembling. The tears she had been holding back all day spilled over as she buried her face in her hands. She had tried everything: government assistance programs, local charities, even odd jobs on the weekends, but nothing seemed to be enough. Desperation gnawed at her. Maria wasn't the type to ask for help, but she was running out of time and options. After a few moments, she wiped her tears and grabbed her laptop. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she typed furiously into the search bar, "Help for single moms in crisis." As she scrolled through links, one article caught her eye. It was about Vice President Kamala Harris visiting a local community center to speak about affordable housing initiatives. Maria clicked on the article, her curiosity piqued. She had always been skeptical of politicians. They made a lot of promises but rarely followed through. But as she read the details of the vice president's visit, something stirred in her. Maria bit her lip, debating whether it was foolish to even consider what she was thinking. But then she remembered Leo, sleeping soundly in the other room, completely unaware of how close they were to losing everything. She couldn't give up, not when he depended on her. Without overthinking, Maria typed out an email. She addressed it to the vice president's office, pouring her heart into every word. She explained her struggles, her fears, and her desperate hope for a solution. By the time she hit send, it was nearly midnight. As she closed her laptop, Maria felt a flicker of doubt. What were the chances that anyone in the vice president's office would even read her email, let alone respond? She told herself it was a shot in the dark, but at least she had tried. Little did Maria know, her message would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. The next morning, Maria woke up to the sound of Leo rummaging in the kitchen. She dragged herself off the couch, her body still sore from the double shift the day before. "Mom, there's no milk," Leo called out, poking his head around the corner. His mop of dark brown hair was sticking up in every direction, and his glasses sat slightly crooked on his nose. Maria sighed, walking over to the fridge. Sure enough, it was nearly empty, save for a few eggs, a stick of butter, and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. "I'll grab some after work," she said, forcing a smile. "How about toast and eggs for breakfast?" Leo shrugged. "Okay," he said, sitting at the small kitchen table and pulling out a comic book to read, while Maria prepared their simple meal. She moved around the kitchen, trying not to think about how long she could keep their food supply stretched if she didn't come up with rent money soon. After dropping Leo off at school, Maria headed to the diner where she worked. It was the same routine every day, taking orders, balancing trays of food, smiling through exhaustion. Her co-workers knew she was struggling, but they were in similar boats, scraping by on tips and long hours. Around noon, as the lunch rush was winding down, Maria's phone vibrated in her pocket. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and checked the screen. Her stomach flipped when she saw the words, "Office of the Vice President." Her hands shook as she answered the call. "Hello? Hi, is this Maria Alvarez?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Maria," she said cautiously, her heart pounding. "This is Deborah Davis. I'm part of the Vice President's staff. We received your email, and Vice President Harris personally read your message. She was incredibly moved by your story and has asked to meet with you." Maria nearly dropped the phone. "What?" she stammered. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Deborah said warmly. "The Vice President is currently working on a housing initiative and would like to hear more about your experience. If you're available, she'd like to arrange a meeting with you this week." Maria's mind raced. Was this real? Could it possibly be happening? She gripped the phone tighter. "Of course I'm available," she said quickly. "When and where?" Deborah explained that the Vice President would be in her area for a community event the following day and wanted to meet Maria afterward at a local outreach center. Maria jotted down the details, her heart thundering in her chest. When the call ended, she sat down in the break room, staring at the wall in disbelief. She had written that email in a moment of desperation, never expecting anyone to respond, let alone the Vice President herself. The next day arrived faster than Maria expected. She dressed in her best outfit, a simple blouse and black slacks that had seen better days, but were clean and presentable. She made sure Leo was ready and took him to the outreach center with her. When they arrived, the place was buzzing with activity. Volunteers handed out food and supplies, and a small crowd gathered to hear Kamala Harris speak. Maria felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she spotted the Vice President standing near the podium, surrounded by security and aides. After the speech, a staff member approached Maria and introduced herself. "Ms. Alvarez, the Vice President is ready to meet with you now. Please follow me." Maria's hands were clammy as she held Leo's hand and followed the staffer to a private room. When they entered, Kamala Harris herself stood waiting, dressed in a tailored blazer, her warm smile immediately putting Maria at ease. "Maria," the Vice President said, stepping forward to shake her hand. "It's so nice to meet you. And this must be Leo." She crouched down slightly to Leo's eye level. "Hi, Leo. I've heard so much about you." Leo, wide-eyed, managed a shy hi as Maria swallowed the lump in her throat. "It's an honor to meet you, Madam Vice President," Maria said, her voice trembling. "The honor is mine," Kamala said sincerely. "Your story is important, Maria, and I want to hear everything." Maria sat across from Kamala Harris, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Leo, still in awe, sat beside her, his small fingers tracing the edges of his comic book, which he had brought along to keep himself occupied. The Vice President's warm and attentive demeanor eased some of Maria's nerves, but she still couldn't believe she was sitting face to face with one of the most powerful women in the country. "Maria," Kamala began, her voice steady but kind. "First, I want to thank you for sharing your story. It takes courage to open up about your struggles, and I want you to know that your voice matters. Now please tell me more about what you and Leo have been facing." Maria took a deep breath, her eyes darting toward Leo for reassurance. His innocent curiosity gave her the strength to speak. "I've been working at a diner for the last 5 years," Maria began, her voice shaking slightly. "It's not much, but it's steady, and I've always been able to make ends meet. Until recently. The rent keeps going up, groceries cost more than ever, and no matter how many extra shifts I pick up, it feels like I'm drowning." Kamala listened intently, nodding as Maria continued. "I applied for assistance through the local programs, but there's so much demand that they couldn't help me. I'm 3 days away from eviction, and I don't know what else to do." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she quickly wiped away a tear that slipped down her cheek. Leo leaned into his mother's side, sensing her distress, and Kamala's gaze softened as she looked at them. "Maria," she said gently, "I hear you, and I want to assure you that you're not alone. What you're going through is something far too many families are experiencing, and it's heartbreaking. But this isn't your fault. The system is failing families like yours, and that's something I'm working to change." Maria nodded, grateful for the vice president's empathy but unsure of what it could mean for her immediate crisis. I want to give Leo a stable home," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want him to grow up feeling like he's not safe, like we don't belong anywhere." Kamala reached out and placed a reassuring hand on Maria's. "And he won't," she said firmly. "You're doing everything you can, and that's what makes you an incredible mother. But I also know that you shouldn't have to fight this battle alone." Before Maria could respond, Kamala turned to one of her aides standing near the door. "Lisa, can we pull the details on Maria's landlord and local housing resources? I want to make sure she has immediate support." The aide nodded and stepped out of the room. Maria blinked, stunned by the swiftness of Kamala's response. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "You don't have to say anything right now," Kamala said, smiling. "But I need you to know that this meeting isn't just about you and Leo. It's about using your story to shine a light on the bigger picture. Families like yours are falling through the cracks, and it's unacceptable. That's why I'm working on a new housing initiative to address these issues. Your voice will help push that forward." Maria felt her throat tighten again, this time with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You're really going to help?" she whispered. Kamala nodded. "Absolutely. We'll make sure you and Leo are taken care of in the short term, but I also want to ensure no other families have to face what you're going through." Just then, Lisa returned, holding a folder. She handed it to Kamala, who opened it and quickly reviewed the contents. "Maria," she said, her tone confident, "we're going to cover your rent for the next 3 months to give you some breathing room. During that time, my team will connect you with job training programs, childcare support, and long-term housing options." Maria's hands flew to her mouth as tears poured down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she choked out. "You don't need to thank me," Kamala said. "This is what we're here for, to lift each other up." Leo, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, suddenly piped up, his voice small but full of awe. "Does this mean we don't have to move, Mom?" Maria pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as she nodded. "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay." Kamala smiled at the sight, her own eyes glistening with emotion. For her, moments like this made all the long hours and political battles worth it. As Maria and Leo walked out of the community center later that day, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter than it had in years. The fresh evening breeze touched her face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe deeply without the crushing anxiety of what tomorrow might bring. Leo skipped alongside her, clutching her hand. His face, usually filled with quiet concern, was now lit with excitement. "Mom, did you hear what she said? We're not going to lose our home," he exclaimed, his voice carrying a joy that melted Maria's heart. "I heard, baby," Maria replied, squeezing his hand. Her voice trembled slightly, still overwhelmed by the events of the day. She couldn't stop replaying the conversation with Kamala Harris in her mind, the kindness in her words, the swiftness with which she took action, and the promises of help that didn't feel hollow or distant, but immediate and real. As they reached the bus stop, Maria sat down on the bench with Leo beside her. She stared at her reflection in the glass of the bus shelter, a mixture of exhaustion and relief etched across her face. "Leo, things are going to get better," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Leo smiled, leaning his head against her arm. "I know, Mom. You always figure it out." Maria's eyes burned with tears at his words. Even at 8 years old, Leo carried a wisdom and quiet strength that she admired. But it also broke her heart to think of how much he had seen and felt during their struggles. He deserved to be a carefree child, and now, maybe for the first time in years, she felt like she could give him that. The next morning, Maria woke up early, determined to take the first steps toward rebuilding their lives. True to their word, Kamala Harris's team had already emailed her a detailed list of resources: rental assistance programs, food vouchers, and even an application for a subsidized childcare program that would allow Maria to work fewer double shifts. For once, instead of staring at a pile of unpaid bills, Maria felt like she was holding a lifeline. She spent the morning making phone calls and filling out forms, her heart buoyed by a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. By noon, she had already scheduled a meeting with a housing counselor and submitted her application for the job training program recommended by Kamala's team. It wasn't just the immediate help that gave her hope. It was the promise of a future where she didn't have to live in constant fear of losing everything. That afternoon, Maria picked up Leo from school. He ran toward her, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Mom, guess what?" he said breathlessly, his face flushed with excitement. "What is it, baby?" Maria asked, smiling. "They're having a pizza party tomorrow because we finished all our reading goals," he said, practically bouncing on his toes. Maria chuckled, ruffling his hair. "That's amazing, Leo. I'm so proud of you." As they walked home, Leo babbled about his favorite books and how he had read an extra chapter every night to make sure he reached his goal. Maria listened, her heart swelling with pride. For so long, she had worried that her struggles were holding Leo back, but now she saw how resilient and determined he was, just like her. Later that evening, as they sat down to dinner, a simple meal of pasta and vegetables, Maria's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from one of Kamala's aides. It read, "Hi, Maria. The Vice President asked me to check in with you. She also wanted me to let you know that your story will be featured in her upcoming housing initiative. She believes your voice will inspire others and help push forward meaningful change. Thank you again for sharing your experience." Maria put down her phone, her heart full. It was hard to believe that just a few days ago, she had been on the brink of losing everything. Now, not only did she have hope for her own future, but she also felt like she was part of something bigger. Her story, the struggles she had endured, might actually make a difference for others like her. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Maria sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She opened a blank document and began typing, pouring out her thoughts about everything that had happened. She wanted to capture it all, the fear, the desperation, the kindness of strangers, and the courage it took to ask for help. By the time she closed her laptop, the weight in her chest had been replaced by something else: purpose. The following weeks brought a series of changes that Maria had never thought possible. With the immediate crisis of her rent resolved, she finally had the space to focus on other areas of her life. Kamala Harris's team remained in close contact, providing guidance and support every step of the way. Maria found herself no longer waking up in a panic, dreading what new challenges the day would bring. Instead, for the first time in years, she woke up with a sense of hope. One of the first changes came with her new schedule. The housing counselor arranged through the Vice President's initiative helped Maria find a part-time office job with better hours and a higher hourly wage than the diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it came with potential for growth. And most importantly, it allowed her to spend more time with Leo. The shift in her routine felt surreal. Gone were the long, grueling double shifts where she barely saw her son. Now she had evenings free to help Leo with his homework, play board games, and even sit down to watch movies together. Leo, who had always been perceptive beyond his years, noticed the difference right away. "You're home more now," he said one night as they sat on the couch, surrounded by popcorn and blankets. Maria smiled, wrapping an arm around him. "I am, and I'm not going anywhere," she said, kissing the top of his head. Her new stability didn't mean everything was easy. The fear of slipping back into financial hardship lingered in the back of her mind. But Maria had something she hadn't had in years: resources. Kamala Harris's initiative didn't just offer temporary solutions, it focused on long-term stability. Maria began attending a financial literacy workshop recommended by the Vice President's staff, where she learned how to budget, save, and plan for unexpected expenses. At first, she felt out of place, surrounded by people who seemed more confident and secure. But as the weeks went on, she realized she wasn't alone. Everyone in the room had faced challenges, and they were all there to take control of their futures. Meanwhile, Leo thrived. Without the constant tension of their previous struggles hanging over their heads, he blossomed at school. His teachers noticed the change immediately. He was more engaged, more confident, and even more eager to participate in class. "Leo's been doing so well," his teacher said during a parent-teacher conference. "He's always been bright, but now he's really shining." Maria fought back tears as she listened, her heart swelling with pride. For years, she had worried that her struggles were holding Leo back, but now she saw just how resilient and capable he was. One evening, Maria received another unexpected phone call. It was Deborah, the aide who had been coordinating much of her support. "Maria, we have some exciting news," Deborah said. "The vice president would like to invite you to attend a press event in Washington, D.C. next month. She'll be introducing her new housing initiative, and she wants you to be there as a featured speaker." Maria froze, her mind racing. "Me? A speaker?" "Yes," Deborah said. "Your story has inspired so many people, and the vice president believes it's important for others to hear directly from someone who's been through the challenges this initiative is addressing." Maria felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Public speaking was never something she had imagined herself doing, but the idea of sharing her journey, and possibly helping others in similar situations, filled her with a sense of purpose. "I'll do it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The following weeks flew by as Maria prepared for the trip. She practiced her speech every evening after putting Leo to bed, working to capture her experiences in a way that felt authentic and impactful. She wanted to make sure her words conveyed not just her struggles, but also her gratitude and hope. When the day of the event arrived, Maria found herself standing backstage at a grand hall in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with policymakers, activists, and reporters, all waiting to hear about the vice president's new initiative. Maria's heart raced as she peeked out at the crowd, but then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Leo stood beside her, dressed in a neatly pressed shirt and tie, his wide eyes scanning the room. "You're going to do great, Mom," he said with a confident nod. Maria smiled, her nerves easing at his words. "Thanks, baby. I'm doing this for us." When it was finally her turn to speak, Maria stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She took a deep breath and began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My name is Maria Alvarez," she said, her words carrying through the room. "And I am a single mother who knows what it means to struggle. But I also know what it means to be given hope." As she shared her story, the room fell silent, her words resonating with everyone present. She spoke of the hardships she had faced, the strength she had found in her son, and the life-changing support she had received through Kamala Harris's initiative. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause. Maria felt tears streaming down her face as she looked out into the crowd, knowing that her voice had made an impact. Maria stepped off the stage to the sound of thunderous applause, her heart racing with a mixture of exhilaration and relief. She had done it. She had shared her story with a room full of strangers, and judging by the looks on their faces, her words had struck a chord. Leo was waiting for her at the edge of the stage, his face beaming with pride. "You were amazing, Mom," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around her waist. Maria hugged him tightly, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, baby," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't have done it without you." Standing nearby, Kamala Harris approached with an encouraging smile. She extended her hand to Maria, but before Maria could shake it, the vice president pulled her into a warm hug instead. "Maria, you were phenomenal," Kamala said sincerely. "Your story is exactly what people need to hear. You didn't just share your struggles. You showed everyone what resilience and hope look like. Thank you for being so brave." Maria felt a lump in her throat. I never thought I'd be in a position like this," she admitted. "For so long I felt invisible, like no one cared. And now," she trailed off, glancing down at Leo, who was smiling up at her. "Now I feel like things are finally going to be okay." "They are," Kamala said firmly, "because people like you are making it clear why change is necessary. And this initiative isn't just a program. It's a promise. We're going to make sure families like yours get the support they need to thrive." As the event wrapped up, Maria and Leo were invited to join Kamala for a brief press conference. Cameras flashed as Maria stood beside the vice president, her hand resting lightly on Leo's shoulder. Reporters fired questions, and Maria answered them as best as she could, her confidence growing with each response. When one reporter asked how it felt to be part of such a groundbreaking initiative, Maria paused, her gaze shifting toward Leo. "It feels like hope," she said simply. "For me, for my son, and for every family out there who's just trying to make it." The words seemed to hang in the air, resonating with everyone in the room. Kamala placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, nodding in agreement. After the conference, Maria and Leo returned to their hotel, exhausted but happy. The room was small but comfortable, a far cry from the uncertainty they had faced just weeks ago. Maria sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some from strangers who had seen her speech and wanted to thank her for sharing her story, others from organizations offering additional support or opportunities. One message in particular caught her eye. It was from a nonprofit that partnered with single parents, offering mentorship and career advancement programs. They had seen her speech and were inviting her to participate in a leadership training program. Maria's heart skipped a beat. For so long, she had been surviving, barely keeping her head above water. But now, she had the chance to thrive. "Mom, look!" Leo's excited voice pulled her from her thoughts. He was standing by the window, pointing outside. "It's the White House!" Maria joined him, her breath catching as she took in the sight of the iconic building glowing softly in the evening light. For a moment, she stood in awe, reflecting on how far they had come. "Do you think one day I could work there?" Leo asked, turning to her with wide, hopeful eyes. Maria smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to," she said. "And no matter what, I'll always be here to cheer you on." Leo nodded, his face serious. "I'm gonna make you proud, Mom, just like you made me proud today." Tears stung Maria's eyes as she pulled him into a hug. "You already do, sweetheart. Every single day." The next morning, as they prepared to leave D.C. and return home, Maria felt a renewed sense of purpose. The trip had been life-changing, not just for the opportunities it had opened, but for the way it had reignited her faith in herself. She wasn't just a struggling single mom anymore. She was an advocate, a voice, and a symbol of what was possible. As they boarded the bus and settled into their seats, Maria looked out the window at the bustling city fading into the distance. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. With Leo leaning against her shoulder, she closed her eyes and whispered a silent promise to herself. No matter how hard it got, she would never stop fighting. For her son, for herself, and for the countless families who deserved the same chance at a better life. And she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The